Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Now today I'm going to be making something which I've had a request for, which is maybe not strictly baking, but it does go in the oven at some time, so perhaps it does count. And that's going to be shepherd's pie or cottage pie. Now I had a request for shepherd's pie, and these days many people make shepherd's pie with minced beef instead of minced lamb, and that's fine. But in the UK we call that cottage pie. So cottage pie tends to be with minced beef, shepherd's pie tends to be with minced lamb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cottage pie with minced beef, and I'm also going to make shepherd's pie with minced lamb. But I'll put the videos on at different times. So the cottage pie first and then the shepherd's pie later. Now for the cottage pie I'm actually going to use a dish like this, a roasting type dish, which is 8.5 by 11.5. For the shepherd's pie I'm going to use individual little tin foil tins, aluminium tins, just so that they can actually be frozen, because I won't need to eat those all at the same time. For the ingredients for the cottage pie I have 750 grams of minced beef, or ground beef that might be called. I have 2 onions which I've chopped quite finely, and 2 carrots which I've diced. My onion weight comes to 340 grams and the carrot comes to 200 grams. I have up to 2 tablespoons of Worcester sauce or Worcestershire sauce, depending on taste. I have 1 tablespoon of flour. I have a teaspoon of dried thyme, and I have a tablespoon of tomato paste, also salt and pepper to taste. Now to go on top of that meat once it's been cooked, we need potato, and so here I have potato which I have peeled and chopped. Now for this recipe I need about 2 pounds 900 grams of potato, but I've got double the amount in here because I'm going to use it for the shepherd's pie as well, and I don't need to do that twice. And then I'll use maybe 100 grams or 150 grams of butter when I'm mashing the potato. So the first thing to do is to melt a knob of butter, or you could use some oil if you want to, in a large pan, because we're going to soften the onions and the carrots before we add the meat. So I'll get on and do that, and I'll show you how that looks. So with the butter just about melted, I'm going to tip the carrots and the onions in, and I'm going to saute them gently until they've started to soften just a little bit. Okay, so the onions and carrots have started to soften. They'll soften more, of course, as we cook further. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in the beef. And I'm going to allow this to brown a little. Now I should say that I'm using minced beef which is only 5% fat. Some beef has, minced beef or ground beef has much more fat in it than that. If you don't like that fat, then maybe you need to just basically cook it for a minute in some water and allow it to go cold, the water to go cold, so the fat rises to the top and you can scrape it off. Now while we're cooking this meat, I'm going to actually cook the potatoes as well, and I've added salt into the potatoes. That's to taste basically, so I can't say how much to put in. I've actually put about 1.5 teaspoons in because there's quite a lot of potato there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle my thyme into our meat. And give that a mix around as well. And then I'm going to add in the tomato paste and about 1 tablespoon of Worcester sauce. I'm going to hold some back so that I can taste it later and decide whether I need to add more. And then I'm going to put half of my stock in. I'll turn the heat up now so that that stock will start to simmer. And with the other half of the stock, I'm actually going to pour my tablespoon of flour into it and stir it around. And then I'm going to add this into the meat mixture as well. And if necessary, I will have more flour available to thicken the sauce later, but hopefully this will be enough. So I'll add that in as well. I'll stir that around. And then I'm going to, once this is simmering, I'm going to leave it to cook for about 15 minutes. And that should then be thick enough, and I'll taste that to check for the flavour. So I'm going to Put some pepper in. And salt. I'll taste it again with another spoon. That actually tastes almost there, maybe a little bit more salt and another teaspoon or so of Worcester sauce. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to have some frozen peas which I have thawed out, which I will add in once this has cooked, because they will cook when we heat this in the oven with the potato on top. So that's going to be maybe a cupful of peas. I'll give you a weight later on for that. I'll have another taste just to see that that is okay. Yep. That's very good now. Okay, so our minced beef with the onions and the carrots has been simmering now for 15 minutes, and the sauce has started to reduce, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to pour in 150 grams of frozen peas and just mix that around. Now you don't have to put peas in, well, you can put any vegetables you want, I suppose, but I tend to like peas in mine. I'm going to leave that now until our potatoes have cooked and cooled down, and when they've cooled down a little bit, I will come back and we will mash the potatoes, and then we'll assemble our cottage pie ready for baking in the oven. And for that we'll need to preheat the oven to 180 Celsius. That's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit. And I'm going to put a baking tray on my lower shelf, just so that if any of the juice comes up the side of the dish and overflows, it will catch it in the baking tray rather than on the floor of the oven. So I'll be back with you when the potatoes are ready for mashing. So I'm back with you, and our potatoes have boiled, and I've drained them and allowed the steam just to evaporate a little bit so there's no water in the pan. So what I've done is I've put my minced beef into my glass bowl, a glass dish, and I'm going to set that to one side. And here I have the potatoes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some batter. In fact, I'm going to start off with about 100 grams and see if I need any more. And I've also got some milk that I can use if I need to. So I'm actually going to try to mash this with my immersion blender. Seems to work reasonably well, this masher, so I'm going to turn the speed up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the rest of the butter in, because I think it can take it. And I'm going to put some pepper in as well. So that's the potato mashed. That did it reasonably well. So what I'm going to do is just get the excess out of the attachment. Now this amount of potato is for this cottage pie and for the shepherd's pie, so I'm only going to use half of it in this dish. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and drop it on the top. Like this. So I didn't need the milk. And then I'm just going to spread that over the mince. Now you can use more or less potato, it's entirely up to you. But I think 2 pounds of potato for this size dish is probably enough. And with that spread like that, what I'm going to do next is simply take a fork and use the tines of a fork to draw lines on it. like that, and then it's ready to go into the oven, as I said, which is preheating at 180 Celsius, 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, and to cook for 30 minutes. Then you take it out of the oven and let it cool down a little bit before you serve it. So I'll come back and show you when it's out of the oven and ready to serve. Now I should say that you could, if you wanted to at this stage, just cover this and put it in the fridge and then heat it up the next day if you want to, or you could even freeze it and then cook it later on, but I'm going to cook mine today. Okay, so I'm back with you, and I have cooked our cottage pie in the oven. I actually cooked it for 40 minutes to make sure that it came up to temperature. It wasn't quite there at 30 minutes, and this is what it looks like. So it's bubbled up around the sides, as I said it might do, and it's browned nicely on the top. Now I'll lift it up and show you. I'm not going to taste it now, it's far too hot and it's going to be saved for dinner. But as you can see, there's the meat layer there, and that's the potato. So that's the cottage pie. And I hope you've enjoyed this recipe, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen, as ever, there will be an eye that you can click on which will take you to this recipe, and I'll also put a link to it below the video. And then I will be back with you with another recipe for the shepherd's pie in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.